Hi, and welcome to my lightning round webinar presentation. I will be presenting some initial results and conclusions related to research exploring the potential of Flickr metadata for recreational modeling. My name is Ilan Havinga. I'm a PhD candidate at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. And on this slide, you can see some of the people that I've been working on this research with and their affiliations. So our main motivation for this research was that recreation is a key source of cultural value. Aesthetic enjoyment, as part of that, is a key factor in recreational ecosystem service modeling. Our aim, therefore, was to explore the potential of Flickr metadata to measure the aesthetic enjoyment of the landscape. And we have based this research so far on three research questions. The first is Flickr user activity related to landscape aesthetics? Number two, do Flickr users employ specific vocabulary for describing aesthetic locations? Number three, does the text that Flickr users employ in scenic locations reflect higher levels of well-being? So a little bit about the data sets and study design. We used the Scenic or Not database in Great Britain as our ground truth. This is a data set of around 220,000 images of Great Britain, each with a scenicness score between 1 and 10. And for our research so far, we took a 10% sample, which you can see in the map on the right-hand side. And per location that we sampled, we downloaded Flickr image metadata in a 500-meter-square search box around each location. Then we extracted the title, description, tags, and comments of each of those images and proceeded to clean the text and reduce it to unique tokens or keywords per scenic or not location. And the kind of basic design of this research is to compare a scenic text corpus versus a non-scenic text corpus. Scenic being locations of with a rating of 7 and above, and non-scenic being between 1 and 6. So moving on to some initial results that we've had. So here you can see Flickr image token scenicness. So this is the mean scenicness plotted on the x-axis of tokens and in at least 5% of scenic or not locations. And on the y-axis, you have standard deviation of that scenicness. And what you can see is that known aesthetic concepts and environments are the most scenic, such as beach, sea, landscape, coast, panorama, and the least scenic are related to the urban and man-made environment, such as bus, train, station, and rail. What is interesting about this figure is that you can see that the most scenic keywords or tokens are used a little bit more widely than the most unscenic tokens. So, for example, panorama has a higher standard deviation, so this needs to be taken into account. Now, this figure shows the most unique. Well, with this figure, we were trying to show or understand the most unique scenic image tokens. So we compared scenic image token counts in at least 5% of scenic locations in the scenic and non-scenic text corpora. And we converted these counts to log scale to better show the differences. And what you can see is that, again, known aesthetic concepts come out the woodwork, such as mountains, highlands, and nouns, especially rock and hills and lakes. So that was an interesting result for us, unexpected. Then we also looked at the mean number of comments per rating, and we saw that users comment more on images in more scenic locations. So more scenic images are rewarded, and that gives us an indication that the Flickr platform is closely related to aesthetics. If user activity is so focused on images with more scenic elements. Finally, I can also share some results related to comment sentiment analysis that we did. We used the Affin sentiment database for this, which is built into the tidytext package in R. And the Affin sentiment database is a database of around 2,000 or 2,500 words, each with a rating between -5 and 5, related to how positive or negative it is. So we searched for those words in our data set and came up with a mean sentiment per location, category, and we also mapped it to Great Britain, which you can see on the right. But the results haven't been that conclusive. You can see that the map doesn't show any clear focus on the scenic locations. There are some hotspots possibly related to aesthetics, such as the Cliffs of Dover in the southeast, or Pembrokeshire on the Welsh coast, or the Lake District in the north of England. But that needs to be further investigated. However, we do see that users are more consistently positive in the most scenic locations. So now, some initial conclusions based on some of these results. Well, Flickr looks like a very relevant data set for measuring aesthetic ecosystem contributions. Users seem to employ a characteristic vocabulary in scenic locations, and especially nouns such as mountains, landscape, highland, sea are the most unique to scenic locations. However, these words are not totally exclusive, so any modeling applications would need to take this into account. Finally, sentiment analysis could be a possible indicator for human well-being, or the well-being generated by aesthetic places, but we need to research this further and really understand the link between sentiment and human well-being. Well, thank you very much for listening to this short presentation. You can contact me with the email on this slide if you'd like more information. Thank you very much, and I can take some questions now.
Great, thank you so much, Ilan. I've got a number of questions coming in. The first one for you is, what is the Scenic or Not database? Is that something that you created?
No, actually, it's a database which is currently hosted by the Warwick Business School. Yeah, it was a project done several years ago, and very kindly they made it open source, or at least part of the data set open source.
Great, thank you for that. And another question, the questioner, asked if you might get into this in your talk, but what are the main drawbacks of this approach? And is there any way to ground truth it?
Well, the Scenic or Not database is a ground truth in our opinion, because it's essentially a survey, a geographically representative survey anyway of Great Britain. So that's why we focused on it, because very rarely do you have such a large ground truth for validation available. So we were quite lucky to have that in Great Britain.
Great. And then there's another question about, is there any bias with Flickr or generally with low technology adopters in using this type of an approach?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a major major drawback of using social media data. I mean, there's different user biases depending on what platforms you go to. Flickr research has suggested that this is mostly kind of older males, and especially activities especially focused in rich countries. So yeah, that's a major issue. But I mean, the benefits that you get from it in terms of the scale that you can do analysis at is also a great advantage. So I think those two kind of balance them out in many occasions.
That's great. And then finally, can you just tell us what your next priority for research is?
So yes, so at the moment, the next priority is looking at the images themselves. So doing working on a large-scale study involving the images.
Great. Well, thank you so much for presenting with us today, Ilan. We're going to
very much.